Right now we're going to have John Bulten come up. He is the founder and director of East Central Ministries. Much of what God has done in his heart and how God has worked through him has resulted in this place and this space and this conference, and so God has used him in really wonderful ways to bring a little glimpse of God's kingdom that is in heaven to earth. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, I emailed John. I just heard his name. I heard about this East Central thing. I was youth pastor here in town, and God had been really stirring in my heart just a burden for the poor and for those who are forgotten and neglected. And I had heard his name spoken well of, and so I emailed him. I was on a sabbatical that the church had given me, and so I asked, hey, can I hang out with you? And so that was kind of the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of kind of my heart for this neighborhood. And so I have a lot to thank God for and John for. So thank you, John, and please share with us.
Thank you. That was a formal announcement for what I want a very informal time. Is anyone cold? Should we turn on the heat a little bit? I turned it down because it's louder, but I'll talk loud. We can probably provide jackets. We save money on heat around here usually. So this time I was just going to share a little bit about the early times of ECM, how it started, give a little bit of history, some story to this place. I'm going to stay away from some of the details, most of them, as far as the programs we do, because the beautiful community who work here at ECM have been practicing to give this tour and share their specific parts, and they're going to do it so much better than I will. So I'm just going to share some of the background to it, how we started. This is informal, so questions, interruptions, any of it, feel free to. If you need more coffee, go back there. That'd be fine too. So let me I moved to Albuquerque in 1996. I had been serving up in Alaska as a youth pastor for a couple years. I have an aunt and uncle who live in Albuquerque. My uncle is an architect builder. And so I wanted to learn some of the building trade, have some practical skills, come down and support my aunt and uncle who are fostering a whole bunch of kids and adopting some kids here in Albuquerque. So moved down here, was working with my uncle, learning how to build houses, renovate, sheetrock, tile, some practical things, and hoping that I could take over his business. To get hold it closer? Okay. There we go. Didn't know I had such a soft voice. Okay. So I was hoping to take over the business, realized it was a small business, it wasn't going to happen. So I stepped out of it, and I was working on my own house, asking God what I should be doing. I thought that maybe I'd be a postman, work with disabled kids. I was open to anything. I was stuccoing a straw bale wall in front of my house, and somewhere in the middle of swiping on some stucco, I just had this picture from God of walking up and down Central, talking to people. And I can't say I had done that before. Figured it was from God because I got really excited about it. I thought, how cool would that be? Just walking up and down Central talking to people. And I started talking to a few people about what would that look like. At the same time, I was attending a small church here, Fellowship Christian Reformed Church, and somebody from our denomination's World and Relief department, the denomination, was working on the reservation. He came and started just kind of probing some questions. Starts asking, the Holy Spirit's at work here in this church, as the Holy Spirit's always at work. So if the Holy Spirit's working, what are you guys doing? And it stirred my heart, because the church wasn't doing much. And it's been kind of an ongoing theme for me of how the church engages, community and the lost and those that are hurt, and outreach and mission. And so as we started talking about that in small groups in the church, I started kind of sharing this picture that God had given me of walking up and down Central, and also that I was unemployed, and that helped. And so the church said, we'll support you. Let's figure this out together. I think they didn't really know what to quite do with me either. So it's kind of, you go over there, and we'll follow. And it was good. I started exploring with what other organizations were doing, other churches were doing for outreach. And this was 1999. And Congress had just passed the Welfare to Work Act in the mid-90s. And some of the churches around the country were coming alongside of families who were on welfare. The new Welfare to Work Act said people could have 5 years of assistance. We're going to call it TANF, Temporary Aid to Needy Families. You get 5 years, and then you're done. And what we realized is 5 years of support might be okay for some people. It wasn't going to be good enough for a lot of people who needed more education, needed more skills, needed a lot of encouragement, needed a lot of support for their children and families. And so, could we as a church come alongside of families who are going through this process? So, I had a little bit of funding from the church, a little from the denomination. I started writing some letters to family and friends, and a few of them seemed to believe that this was something they could support. And we launched a ministry that would really come alongside of families on welfare. And we started learning what that meant and started making some connections with agencies. I would say at best it was a mediocre effort. We went in with a lot of zeal, but there wasn't a huge support in the church for stepping out to do this, I was finding out. And there was mediocre support from the agencies to kind of partner with the church. So we struggled those first 9 months. Again, I went in with a lot of zeal. I was running all over the city, kind of trying to explore and figure this out. At that point, I was encouraged to go to a Christian Community Development Association conference, CCDA. John Perkins is the founder of CCDA, phenomenal African American, like in his 80s now, maybe, about right. And I think he has a 3rd grade education. At this point, though, he has 5 or 6 honorary doctorates. He's the son of a sharecropper, and through the civil rights, he was came to Christ, and planted himself in Mississippi where he had grown up, and just started developing a philosophy of how to engage community. Jesse's going to talk this afternoon more about the Christian community development philosophy, the holistic nature of ministry. So I won't get into much detail on that, because Jesse will share about that. But I went to this conference in Chicago about 9 months after we had started this ministry, and we were calling it Good Samaritan Ministries. And it radically changed my perspective of how to engage the poor, the vulnerable, how we come alongside. A couple of those learning, we started with more of an issue. We have an issue of welfare to work, how to engage families on welfare. We didn't have much focus geographic. We were all over the city. I was going kind of with conversations, but trying to figure it out as we went. Christian community development started talking about neighborhood and geographic boundary and community. So from some of my learning in that first conference, started looking at neighborhood in a much different way. Some people from the church and I started walking some neighborhoods. This church is over at Indian School near San Mateo. So I wanted a geographic boundary close to, in proximity to that fellowship. So we started looking at some places in Uptown. Went down to Martineztown in the valley. Little bit in the South Valley, but I was kept getting drawn back to this community here, up and down Central, partly because it's kind of where I had pictured myself, but also because this neighborhood had a reputation. Trey Hammond explained some of the neighborhood yesterday, had a reputation as being vulnerable. In the late 80s, early 90s, this was an extremely violent neighborhood. I think at one year there were 30 homicides just within a square mile or maybe 2 square miles. As I started kind of prayer walking and talking to people in this community, started finding out that a lot of good work was happening already here. I didn't in any way have an idea that I would be coming in to nothing. God was already at work here. I just wanted to figure out what it was He was already doing. The neighbors in this community were doing marches. They had a big blowhorn and would march, stand in front of drug houses and scream at them. And the police were involved in kind of in the city, and Department of Justice had kind of come together and formed task force and specific targeted approaches for this neighborhood. The neighborhood barriers that blocked some of our side streets went in at that point to curb drug traffic, make it harder for people to get in the neighborhood and out. 20 years later, it's just a pain in the butt for us neighbors. We keep threatening to, in the middle of the night, go out there with sledgehammers and knock that barrier out of there. So if anyone wants to join us tonight, we have some sledgehammers. But there were a lot of strategies for this neighborhood, for the violence, for the crime. I started doing some demographics, just walking. Realized there are 27 churches in these 2 square miles. There were about 150 small businesses in these 2 square miles. Just started documenting the organizations that were here, how many people, what the demographics were, and trying to get myself a picture of this community. So at this point, we have kind of a fledgling welfare to work thing going on. Me walking up down the streets, a lot of people praying, wondering what this is supposed to be, including myself. And I think this is kind of the big testimony that this really was an exercise of trying to follow the Holy Spirit, trying to follow what God was revealing, entering us into. It was not a master plan. It was not a 5-year strategy. It was not a lot of money being poured into something and long-term approach to it. We were literally taking steps day by day. Talking with Deb today, earlier, God shows us just a little step at a time. And faith is taking that next step when we're not quite sure what that second step is after that. And God seems to honor that. I know that you've experienced that in your own lives. We all have. And in this approach, it's just been, how do we not only do it individually, but do it in the midst of community? How do we look at this community as a vibrant, whole organism that's dynamic and moving and alive? And how do we engage this larger organism, entering into it and being a part of it? So Christian community development taught me about incarnational living. The Platts talked about that. I realized that at the time I was living down in this North Valley, commuting up to a neighborhood, it didn't make much sense when my heart was here in this community, where it was developing, growing in this community. It took a while. It took about 8 years before I was able to move into this community. At that point, it was in conjunction with a housing co-op. And a little bit later, Blanca will talk about our housing cooperative. So in some patience, I wasn't very patient, but in the patience that I had to have, it wasn't just moving in, it was also moving into a intentional community, which was a beautiful thing. Hard, extremely hard. A bunch of people still live in it and have, and it is hard being intentional with neighbors and how to love and serve each other. So I don't want to go too much longer, but I'll be around for a lot more questions. I guess what's been on my heart though is small steps, small beginnings. Everything we're going to walk through and see was not some grand vision that I had or others. It's developed very slowly, most of the time with lack of planning, probably, too much lack of planning. Bring some good people around you, overcome your deficits. That's what I learned. Because we each add a piece to a puzzle in this. So East Central, Jesse mentioned the word mosaic this morning. Beautiful artistic mosaic, but each piece has a role to make up a picture. And last night you heard some stories of Presbyterian Church, and Rhonda's doing weeds, and Sammy's work down in El Paso, and Bethany, and today you're going to hear a lot more stories from this neighborhood. This afternoon, Joanne Landry, who's been a pastor in this neighborhood faithful for years, and Enrique Cardiel, who's public health and living in this neighborhood. You're going to hear a lot more local stories today and this afternoon. And you look at each one, and it's a small thing. ECM is a small thing. I still see it as a very small organization, especially in the scope of the need and the vastness of this community, of our city, of our state. So we're all small players in a very big picture. And it's good to get together and talk and hear these stories and see how each person is doing their part, their role, and how it starts to paint this beautiful mosaic of something greater than any one of us could do together. Any one of our churches, any one of our organizations, any one of our families. So see this time as a small piece of something larger that's happening that hasn't been planned out, at least not by us. So go into it expecting to see some new things. When you walk the neighborhood, look for the beauty in it. Look past some of the razor wire and the concrete and the fences, and look for the beauty of this community, because it is. It's a phenomenal organism. This neighborhood, I was envisioning working with folks that were struggling in addiction as I was in the neighborhood. Still with some of the homeless. What I realized is the neighborhood was an immigrant community. I didn't know that when I first got here. So I had to learn. My Spanish is terrible. There's no reason that I'm running an organization in an immigrant community with terrible Spanish. And so you need good people around you. So I can play one part of it, and they do all the rest of the work. And then I stand up here and talk about it. So I'm going to let them talk about it. But any questions right now? Any thoughts? It's casual. Yeah.
I was just thinking, we're networking, came into my mind when our prayer group from Hope about 3 or 4 weeks ago went down and did a prayer walk around the Albuquerque rescue mission.
Here, hold on just a second. Come on up here, Debbie.
I don't want to come up there. Can you all hear me? I got a big
She can.
mouth.
Yeah,
So about 3 weeks ago, the prayer group from Hope Church, we went down to the Albuquerque rescue mission to do a prayer walk, and we did a prayer walk here a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that came up during our time of prayer is, first of all, I noticed, and I'd never been to the Albuquerque rescue mission, and I'm from Ohio. I've been here for a few years, but I'm not familiar with all the geographical area of Albuquerque yet. But one of the things that came up during the time of prayer was noticing, like right next door to them was this huge place called, I think it was the Good Shepherd. And I'm like, well, who are they? And nobody knew who they were. I mean, it was obvious they were Christian and that they were doing a lot of things there. But they're right next door. And then a little further down the street is a place that I'd never heard of, and it's not necessarily Christian. It's something that the city's doing called Heading Home. And they're doing, like, all these places are kind of doing the same things. Now, Heading Home has made it known, I don't think they've been around for a while. A couple of years. And they'll take people who are homeless, who've gone, maybe they needed medical help, so they go to the emergency room. But when they come out, there's no place for them to go to convalesce, to get better. And so Heading Home, that's one of the things they do. They have so many beds, and I don't know how long they keep them, a day, 2, 3 days, to help them to get back on their feet. But there was all these correlations of doing the same thing. And one of the things that one of the gals that I was with said, well, Heading Home really wants to connect, Christian, non-Christian, doesn't matter, with other places that are doing this so that they can pool their resources and teach each other and support each other. So I don't know, maybe you're doing that kind of networking, you know, Christian, non-Christian. I don't know if that's going on or not, but
Yes.
that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. We partnerships, collaborations, relationships, friendships, it's all part of the mix here at East Central Ministries. I apologize, my staff, I'm sorry. I've been drilling into them. When you stand up, you have to answer the what question. What are you? Because if you don't answer the what question, you lose everyone. The what people want to know, what are you? And then move on to why and stuff. And here I start rambling on about this and that, and I'm sorry. You guys anyway, you guys teach me. So, but I have a hard time saying, what is East Central Ministries? We're a faith-based organization, but we're also this weird collection of community, trying to figure out our faith, trying to live it out, trying to build connections and partnerships, trying to explore. So we're an organization, we're a community. Sorry, staff, I didn't do that. I'm going to learn next time. Tell what? Telling them what? Tell what? Okay. So anyway, good. Anything else?
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
So, you
Speak up
started-
loud.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Speak.
Y'all can't hear me? I'm pretty loud. I'm pretty loud. So, my question is since 1999, it's 2016 now, is there now a mission? Is there now this is who we are, this is what we do? Like, because you said, at the beginning that it was kind of, we're trying to figure it out, we're,
Yeah.
taking baby steps. Is there now a mission for ECM?
Yeah, yes, of course there is. We keep changing the wording of our mission statement. I would say in its most succinct, though, we're a community of neighbors and people who, motivated by faith, are seeking the whole transformation of our community. How's that?
Nice and
You
short.
won't find that written anywhere, because I don't even know what we have written at this point. That's why we have a plan for the future of people who can organize better writing, and we're getting there after this conference. But it really is saying, how do we, in a holistic sense, engage every aspect of this neighborhood? If it spills over into others, beautiful. But we want to focus geographic. We want to focus on people we can ask them what their felt needs are, what their assets are. How do we build something beautiful together? How do we learn together? How do we grow together? How do we bring a diverse group and share story and share ideas that we can engage together? We are followers of Jesus, but that's broad. We're all figuring out what that means. There's a lot of mystery to that. And so we want to embrace, we want to encourage, we want to invite people into it. Sarah's going to talk tonight about invitation and what she's learned from us about that and what we've learned from her. So
The tour will probably flesh out what that looks like.
the tour will flesh out some of what that looks like. Good point. And it's an open book. It's an open story. I think there is no set defined. It is being defined. As you join in and add in, it gets expanded a little bit more and shaped a little bit more. So, anyone else? Sweet. How are we going to do this? Here, Jesse.